Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Sunday service at Ananda, wherever you're joining us from. Today's topic is not, does Satan exist? It is a good topic, but I'm glad I didn't get that one. Today's topic, how democratic is the truth? And what it's referring to is these great truths of self-realization that we have, not merely the teachings of Yogananda, whom we follow here, but the spiritual essence of all great traditions, the esoteric deep teachings of self-realization. Should they be shared freely, or should we exercise some discretion in sharing them? And as you heard in the reading today, Jesus Christ gives a very unambiguous answer. Do not give that which is holy unto dogs, nor cast ye pearls before swine. Using dogs and pigs and pearls, he's giving some powerful imagery there, just in case there was any doubt in your mind. Now, every week we look at the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. That's one of the many great joys of being on this path. Yogananda came here not merely to share the Sanatana Dharma teachings of yoga, but also to show that Jesus Christ in the Bible and Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita were talking about the same thing. And every now and then, pursuing that path, you come across something that's wonderful. So I want to delve a little bit deeper into today's reading, both in the Bible and the Gita, because there's something interesting that's going on there. Matthew chapter 7, from which this quote comes from, is the final part of the famous Sermon on the Mount. Chapters 5 through 7 is where there's a Sermon on the Mount, and 7 is when he's wrapping it up. It's the smallest of the 3 chapters on this sermon. Jesus, in his short ministry, didn't give too many sermons or discourses. In fact, there's 5 that are documented in the Gospel of Matthew. They are called the 5 discourses. Some of them are when talking with his disciples, and a couple of them are with a larger set of people. They are actual sermons, of which, of course, the most famous is the Sermon on the Mount. By the time he comes to talking about dogs and pigs, he has already talked about the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He's talked about turning the other cheek and loving your enemies. He's talked about seek ye the kingdom of God first, and he's talked about the Lord's Prayer. Many, many beautiful things that have set the moral compass for a large percentage of humanity for 2,000 years. And then he comes to this, he's wrapping things up now. He said all these wonderful things, and he's wrapping things up. And in verse number 6, he says this, give not that which is holy unto dogs. And then in verse number 7, excuse me, he follows up with something that almost sounds contradictory. He says, ask and it shall be given you, and seek and ye shall find it, knock and it shall be opened unto you. This is saying all you need to do is ask sincerely. All you need to do is seek with all your heart, and you will have it. It, of course, refers to kingdom of God, Satchidananda, infinite, ever-existing bliss, moksha, liberation, whatever you want to call it. All you need to do is ask. There's no eligibility criteria. Dogs and swine are not excluded. It doesn't say it, but I'm just making a point here. Why it's an odd little dichotomy, odd little, of course it's not contradictory, but on the face of it, it seems odd. Now let's move a few hundred years before to the time of Krishna. Krishna too, an avatar, God in human form that walked the earth. He doesn't have a ministry, so he doesn't really give any sermons, but he does have a few discourses given for his disciples or when speaking with other people. And the most famous of those conversations that he has is one that he has with his beloved friend and disciple Arjuna. It's in a dramatic setting, as many of you know, on the eve of a great battle, when it's an apocalyptic battle that needs to be fought for the betterment of earth. And Arjuna, the hero, without whom there is no battle, and the last moment says, I will not fight. The reasons for that are not important, but he just gives up in the last moment. And then Krishna, what does he do? He has the talk with him. Okay, what are you doing? Don't be weak of heart, and on and on. And that talk, of course, is known as the Bhagavad Gita. It is his most famous discourse. And in it, he too tells many wonderful things, the imperishable nature of the soul. He talks about a serviceful life, karma yoga, done with a sense of doership. He talks about dhyana, the path of meditation, bhakti, the path of devotion, and jnana, the wisdom that comes from unselfish actions and devotion and meditation, and on and on. And then finally, in the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where he's summarizing, he says the following, and it's probably one of the top 5 most famous verses of the Bhagavad Gita, and I'll say that in Sanskrit. It says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyom mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. Sarva dharman parityajya, forsaking all other duties, mamekam sharanam vraja. Remember me, surrender to me alone. Mama ekam, me alone. And this is a conversational, so this is God speaking to Arjuna. Surrender to me alone. Aham tvam sarva papebhyom mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. I will rid you of all your sins, that is, grant you liberation. Do not grieve. A similar promise that Jesus makes when he is concluding his most famous sermon, in the Sermon on the Mount. Ask and it shall be given you, and seek and ye shall find it. Krishna says, all you need to do is surrender to me alone, and I will grant you liberation, moksha. Krishna's is a conversation, so it's done in a conversational style. It's in active voice. Jesus' is a sermon, so it is done in a more passive voice, grammatically speaking. Ask and it shall be given you, and so on. And right after this, chapter 18, concluding his most famous conversation, Krishna, just like Jesus, he says, again using strong words, never share these truths to one that is not self-disciplined, atapaskaya. In Sanskrit, tapas is self-control. One without devotion, abhaktaya, and one without a serviceful or receptive mentality, shushruyate, and one who speaks ill of me. So these two masters, avatars, separated by space, time, and culture, not only said the same things, but said it in the same order. They felt it important to say, it's really simple. It's not a big deal. All you need to do is ask. By the way, don't tell this to anybody. Not anybody, but kind of, use discretion. So what's going on? Swami Kriyananda, the founder of Ananda, a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, he tells a story. It's actually not a story, it's just a big joke. It's funny. In the book Art and Science of Raja Yoga, which sheds a lot of light on this topic. It's about duck hunting. Okay, so there's a man that goes duck hunting on a lake, of course, because that's where ducks are. And he takes his rifle with him because you need a rifle. And he takes his dog with him because apparently when you go duck hunting, once you kill a duck, you don't get the duck yourself, the dog goes and gets it. I haven't been duck hunting, and I probably, I never will in this lifetime. But those are the rules, okay? So both rifle, dog, and of course beer, takes all those 4, goes duck hunting. Swamiji is saying this, just so. And then shoots his first duck. And the dog walks on water and gets the duck back. I say, what just happened? And then he doesn't trust himself, and then shoots another duck. Dog walks on water, gets the duck back, looking at his beer. Is this spiked? I should have got the good German beer, he's looking at it. And then he doesn't trust himself. So he wants a witness. Next day, he brings his friend, doesn't tell him anything, and then shoots a duck, Sure enough, dog walks on water. He looks at his friend. Friend is just sitting there with a bored expression. He's thinking, am I imagining things? I should have gotten the MRI that my doctor said. He's not sure at all. And then shoots another duck. What does the dog do? Walks on water. Gets it back. And now he cannot bear it anymore. He looks at his friend and says, did you see that, what my dog just did? I said, yeah, I saw it. You got a stupid dog. It doesn't know how to swim. Give not unto dogs that which is holy. You see, this friend's reality had no room to accommodate the miracle that he just saw. He was so stuck in the worldliness of his reality that when he saw the miracle, it didn't even register. It got tossed aside, and he only fit it in what he knew, which was during duck hunting, a dog swims and gets the duck. And he says the dog didn't swim. You got a stupid dog. This is similar. It says with these great teachings, it says elsewhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 12, where the people, and God warns him, he says, you are among people with the eyes to see, but who do not see, and with the ears to hear, but they do not hear. And it's the same here. For a worldly person, if you talk about things like simple living, the need for daily self-control and discipline, and renunciation, or the larger reality of prana, the vital energy, and the chakra, the spinal centers through which the energy moves, and so on, there is no place for it to land. It just gets ignored, and it might even have the opposite effect. That might say, I knew this entire yoga teachings are malarkey. Malarkey is a word, right? Entire yoga teachings are malarkey, baloney. I shouldn't have come here, and they might just turn away from it. So Padma teaches a course called Spiritual Counseling, and in that she says, when somebody comes to you for spiritual advice, don't tell them what you know. Instead, listen carefully the question they are asking and answer that question, because that's what they're ready to hear. Okay, so that's why Krishna and Christ repeatedly, you see these both, the teachings are very simple, but be careful, don't share it with anyone. Don't share it with just anyone. Okay? Now, let's pause here for a moment. This is all great, almost sounds a little sanctimonious, talking about, my understanding of the truth is higher, and I got to decide and judge who I share it with. And that's not a good kind of way to approach the spiritual path. So let's turn the frame of reference around and point that light of truth or introspection, swadhyaya, back onto ourselves and ask the question, are there pearls cast before me that I have failed to recognize? Is there essence of these teachings that I have failed to see? In other words, how do you develop the eyes to see and the ears to hear? Now, the solution to this is always the same, and it's twofold. There are many things, a few things I'll tell you in the next 5-10 minutes, that they are all twofold. The first part of the solution, developing the eyes to see and the ears to hear, to not miss the pearls of wisdom. The first is, what are you asking? Ask and it shall be given you, but what are you asking? When I first came on the path of meditation about 20 years ago, I was really into the teachings. I wanted to learn meditation and go deep inside, and I didn't need convincing. But when I sat down to meditate, what did my heart truly want out of meditation? I had been suffering from depression for probably 17, 18 years. And when I sat down to meditate, I did tell repeat the prayer with my mouth. I said, Divine Mother, bless me, let me feel the silent footsteps of thy presence deep in the altar of my heart. I said all of that stuff. But what my heart truly wanted was to be rid of depression. I didn't want that sick feeling of anxiety when I went to bed. I didn't want to wake up joyless and flat the next morning. That's what I truly wanted. That's what I truly asked. Ask and it shall be given you. Sure enough, after a little bit of Kriya meditation, the depression did go. It was the most amazing experience. But if you ask of these teachings simply a way to better, to make your delusive existence more comfortable, then that's what you get out of it. But after a while, this cannot be sustained. After a while, you either give up meditation or the spiritual path, whatever that might be, or you begin to ask the big question. Swami Kriyananda says that eventually everybody must turn towards light. Then when you ask the big questions, when I made that transition, then I saw the teachings in a different way. I attended the same classes from Hriman and Padma and Nivritti and Jamuna and others, and heard the same talks from Swami Kriyananda that I had been attending and listening to, but I began to hear different things in there. Because I was asking a different question now, you see. So ask and it will be given you, of course, but you gotta ask the right question. That's part one. Remember I said there is two. What is part two? Part two, see, at some point we'll all ask. If you're too young to have been frustrated with life, just wait. At some point you will be, okay? And most of us in this room, we've said, okay, I'm done. Where do I go from here? We will ask sincerely. We will seek. But the next part is what all the yogic techniques, all the spiritual path, it's not about asking. The ups and downs of karma are choreographed exquisitely for us to ask the big question. Nobody gets away from it. The second part, what's necessary, is listening for the answer. You can't ask and walk away. The answer is given to you, but you're not there. As Sriman says, you have to be present to win. You knock, and before it's opened, you go to a different door and knock again, then what happens? So it's about listening. Every single yoga technique, in fact, every technique, practice, ritual in all spiritual traditions is about listening. The Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, they talk repeatedly. Be still and know that I am. Vyavasayatmika buddhirekeha kurunandana, Krishna says, which is, for one, that it's a true seeker. His intellect is single and one-pointed, and it listens. So then this entire topic boils down to how do you listen? And of course, that is another topic on its own, but very briefly, it again has two parts to it. The first part is self-control. The second part is devotion. It's the bringing the energy inward and upward. Self-control is turning away from the outside world. Devotion is recognizing that whatever is happening happens because of a higher cause. The word in Sanskrit for devotion is bhakti. Bhakti means cleaving, division. And what that's referring to is, instead of saying everything is about me, oh, I'm always the victim, or I made this happen, I screwed up. Bhakti is that cleaving. It says it's not just I, it's you. And not that you screwed up, it's not that. It's, although we sometimes feel like saying that, it is more that the reality that I experience is determined by you, and I have to recognize it. That's bhakti, cleaving. So mere self-control without devotion simply makes us more of what we already are. Self-control gives us a great deal of inner energy, but if it's not tempered, if the soul doesn't expand, like in today's affirmation, to be in tune with a higher reality, it simply gives us the energy to be more angry, to make more money, to be more whatever. Devotion without self-control is also the same issue, it will become outward feelings. Devotion becomes emotion. And again, the energy goes outward. But the combination is where magic happens, self-control and devotion. So that brings me to the final part. This is not easy. I certainly cannot walk away from here and say, okay, I'm going to have lunch, and after lunch I'll be self-controlled and I'll be devoted. What's going to happen? I'll do that perhaps until dinner, and after that maybe self-control goes out the window, devotion goes out the window. Tomorrow it's back to the same grind. What you need is a back door. And again, I told you there are many twos here. There's not one, but two back doors given, again, regardless of which spiritual tradition, but most effectively in yoga, and especially in yoga. The first back door is service. Seva. So in Sanskrit it is seva, service. Service is not volunteering. When you take the act of volunteering or philanthropy or giving out your energy, infuse it with a dose of humility. And infuse it saying, okay, I volunteered, maybe I did this and that, but God, you would have found somebody else to do it if I didn't do it, but by doing it, I got purified, thank you. That turns volunteering into service, okay? Work into seva. Why is that? Because that reduces the size and influence of the ego, and therefore devotion, that cleaving, is easier to get. The attraction of outward things is less, and therefore self-discipline, self-control becomes easier. You see the connection there? So that is backdoor number one. Backdoor number two is even more unexpected, and that is you can both increase your self-control and your devotion, and thereby have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, by working with your breath and with your energy. Because the culprit in all of these, what the ego does is it takes the mind into a frenzy. It makes it restless and makes stillness and listening impossible. Things like self-control, devotion, service are one way of doing it, but the mind is connected to the breath and to the energy. So when through the breath we work with the energy, and the highest of those practices, of course, is Kriya Yoga, where we work directly with the energy and the breath and the spine, then ego again diminishes. And therefore, we begin to see, when the next time the dog walks on water during duck hunting, we will see that it walked on water, and wow. So those are the two back doors, service and the meditative, the practices of Raja Yoga, of Kriya Yoga. Between those two, they will increase our self-control, devotion. So how democratic is the truth? Ask and it shall be given you. Seek ye shall find it. All you need is surrender. But you have to ask the right question, and you have to have the self-control and devotion to listen to the answer. And fortunately, or if all of these sound intimidating, fortunately, there's an immortal promise that Babaji told Lahiri Mahashaya when he gave Lahiri, Lahiri is this gentleman over here, his disciple is Yogananda. When he got the permission to give Kriya Yoga to everyone, Babaji told him, also tell them the immortal promise that Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, Swalpamatyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Swalpamatyasya dharmasya, even a little bit of practice of this inward religion, even a little bit, self-control, discipline, bhakti, seva, working directly with the energy, all of these, even a little bit of practice will free you from dire fears and colossal sufferings. So let me end this with a wonderful reading from Whispers from Eternity. It's a book of prayer demands by Yogananda. Listen to this reading and perhaps say that prayer mentally, and listen for a minute for what answer might come. This is prayer demand for devotion. O Father, let me hold my heart in my folded hands. Teach me to saturate my prayers with thy love. Give me the simple, sincere devotion of a child towards thee. Teach me to realize thy nearness behind the voice of my prayer. Teach me to realize thy breath in my own breathing. Teach me to feel thee in my emotion. Teach me to know that thy wisdom is my understanding. Teach me to feel thine all-pervading life in my life. Flood my senses with thy light.